a continuation of a presentation I gave in 2023, and it was a pleasure to hear from John that he felt it would be good to have an update on the work that we're doing at Praxis Framework. I'll start off like all good TV programs and spend a few minutes catching up on what happened last week, so to speak, before I get on to the new stuff. I started off the last presentation and this one with this statement. It's called Cobb's paradox, and it kind of underpins the problem that we're trying to address. If any of you are active on LinkedIn, you will no doubt be bombarded with, your feed will be full of posts that say X% of projects fail. Typically, those people who are selling agile services will say 80% of waterfall projects fail, and those who are selling waterfall services will say 80% of agile projects fail. Starting off with a big number of projects that fail is the beginning of so many sales pitches. But cynicism aside, more projects do not succeed as well as we would like than should do. Given the vast body of knowledge and experience that we, the profession, have, and by profession I mean all of us collectively who are involved in managing projects and programs and portfolios, it's a fair comment to say that we should be doing better than we are. And that really is what Praxis is trying to address. The fact that we've got so much skill, so much knowledge, but we seem to have trouble actually applying them and bringing them to bear and actually delivering the benefits that we should do from our projects. So the ethos behind Praxis is that we want to break down the barriers to gaining the benefits of good practice. And, this list I used 2.5 years ago when I did the 2023 presentation, and I looked at it again for tonight, and I thought, yeah, everything that we've done since then still fits into these headings. So this is the catch-up from the previous episode. What we've tried to do is to pull together an integrated framework for the project delivery profession. And I should say that I'm using the term project delivery in the way that the government profession uses it. They talk about project delivery as a collective term for projects, programs, and portfolios. So instead of clumsy acronyms like P3M, government has its project delivery function, which covers everything to do with projects, programs, and portfolios. So what Praxis attempts to do is to bring together projects, programs, and portfolios, i.e. all of project delivery, and all the different aspects of that, which is the knowledge, the competencies that we need as individuals, the processes we may use, and the maturity of our organizations, because it's not just about individuals, it's about those individuals working in an environment, in a context, which is sympathetic and encouraging for projects. You can't have a successful project in a bad context, a bad environment, and vice versa. So I'll talk a bit more about this later, but it's about integrating all the different kinds of practices within that wider body of knowledge. It's about making them accessible and relevant to different circumstances. And in terms of then applying that material, embedding it in the organization, embedding it in our personal day-to-day habits, I previously identified 4 key areas. Monday morning refers to the fact that so many people, I'm sure many of you have been on a course, you go and learn all sorts of good practices in project management, maybe for a week, maybe a fortnight or longer. And then Monday morning, you go back to work and you don't get a chance to apply it because the context of the organization, the pressures within the organization, all the stuff you've got to catch up on for the last week, it gets in the way. And some of you may be familiar with something called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Basically, it says if you've learned some new skills or gained some new knowledge, if you don't start using it straight away, it very quickly dissipates. And all that learning over that course can very easily evaporate and not actually get used. I think it's also important, if we're going to address this problem of embedding knowledge, we've got to make people realise that this is a long-term commitment. It's not just I go on a 2-day course and I go back to work and everything works fine. You have to continue to learn, continue to apply. Project management is simple, but not easy. It's a bit like losing weight. We know that to lose weight, you have to eat less and move more. But actually doing that is not as easy as it seems. Under the title of diverse teams, I'm talking about the fact that with all these good practices and all this good content, we all have different personalities and we all perceive and internalize those practices in different ways. We may talk about a very simple, well-established good practice, but depending on my personality, I will interpret and apply that in different ways. And that's something which often we don't appreciate. When you take those good practices back and you think that you're doing them the way they should be, and you come into conflict with somebody else who thinks they should be done in a different way. Now, that's again something that needs to be addressed if we're going to get this harmonious approach within an organization. And that harmonious approach is measured by organizational maturity. So all of these things we try to build into the praxis framework. And I should say right up front that this is something where everything we do is free. I'll come a bit later to the idea of the commoditization of the project management profession, which I think is a real problem. But as far as praxis is concerned, with a couple of exceptions, which you'll understand why, everything is completely free. So let's look at the components we had when I first talked to the BCS in 2023. First of all, we've got the website, and that contains 5 key areas, which I've shown very small icons of there. Knowledge are the functions of project management, risk management, benefits management, scope management, leadership, stakeholder management, communication, conflict management, all those kind of things. Those are the functions. Then we have the method. We have to decide what we want to do before we do it. To a degree, there are lots of variations on a theme here, which I'll come to, in a world that focuses a lot on agile. But those are the first 2 sections, functions and method. Then we have competency, to describe what individuals need to do in order to apply this knowledge and how they can demonstrate that they're competent in doing so. Fourthly, we have organizational maturity. The leaders of organizations cannot just send all their staff on a course and expect everything to improve. They might come back with lots of knowledge, but are they, as leaders of the organization, creating a fertile environment for applying that knowledge? That may not be the case, and that's something else we have to look at. And then, of course, there are all the various, always increasing tools, techniques, models, and that's all built into the encyclopedia. And all these sections are on the Praxis Framework website, and they're all covered by something called a Creative Commons license, which means you're free to use them and duplicate them as long as you acknowledge where they came from. Now, as you can perhaps imagine, with those 5 sections and all the content that's in them, it's quite extensive. It's a very large website. So in terms of practical application, there's a lot more information there than any one project manager is likely to use on any one project. So we have other things that we've introduced over the years. One called Praxis Local, which is it's a PowerPoint-based file which is saved as a PDF, which you can edit and add in links to your own content on your internal servers, and it acts as a sort of tip of the iceberg, which you can tailor to pick up whatever content you want from Praxis and combine it with whatever content you want from other sources. And then you save it as a hyperlinked PDF, and then you can distribute it to everybody in your organization so that everybody's singing off the same hymn sheet. Then we have a tool, online tool, which is a questionnaire about how attributes are being applied within a project, within a program, within a portfolio, or the entire organization. This is based on the CMMI capability maturity model, and it's also based on a book which I would recommend to anybody called the Checklist Manifesto. Very briefly, this was written by a surgeon called Anil Gawande, and by applying checklists in medical surgery worldwide, the United Nations managed to reduce surgical mortality by 40%. So in a truly life or death situation, if working through checklists with a team can reduce mortality by 40%, I think it's worth having a look at in project management. But of course, in medicine, as in project management, you have to overcome the idea that people will think, oh, checklists, bureaucracy, hate it. Well, it works. It works for airline pilots, it works for surgeons. So it's certainly worth thinking about. And I'll come back to this later. So we have this checklist-based tool, which works for both individuals in terms of embedding their knowledge, how well am I doing? It works for the organization in terms of how is our corporate maturity improving in real time. And on a team level, it makes sure that if you have a project manager who thinks they are the God's gift on risk management, the 360-degree return from the checklist might say, well, actually, you're not. Some of your team members and stakeholders don't think the risk management is quite so good as you say it is. So we start to build up a picture of how a project is being run. And I did mention that people perceive all these things in different ways. And this next component, which we refer to as team praxis, was the first example of somebody coming along to us and saying, I've seen this thing called Praxis Framework. I've seen that it's free. I see that it's just trying to help everybody apply project management. And I've got this idea how we take the results of the DISC psychometric assessment and explain to people how, depending on where you are in your mix of the 4 areas in a DISC assessment, some of you will be familiar with a DISC assessment. It's, I'm told, the most, we all hear about Myers-Briggs, but apparently DISC is the most popular basis for psychometric tests. And what team praxis does is to say, well, if you're a combination of typically red and blue, is a color that's used for dominant and collaborative, then you're going to look at certain things in this way, and you're going to expect certain things from other people. So for the vast majority of the topics in praxis, we did some questionnaires, did some research, and came up with a list of a series of pages which say, right, if you know your DISC type, and you know the DISC types of the people you're working with, have a look at these pages and get a feel for why you perceive the way you should manage risk management differently from your team members or perhaps your stakeholders. This is one of those areas which it's not definitive differences. It's designed to make you think, well, am I disagreeing? Am I, as the project manager, disagreeing with my sponsor simply because we just have this different perspective on the same ideas? And that's, again, there to help you solve some of the friction, perhaps, in a team and get to understand each other better. Now, of course, we live in a world where everybody companies, individuals like to get certifications. So we teamed up with a company called APM Group, who are a very popular certification body, and put together a series of certifications. So this is the first example of something we can't give away for free, because obviously it involves a lot of people working on it. Oh, excuse me. But what we very carefully did was to avoid what so many other people do, whether it be Prince or the PMI or many other organizations. They typically have a basic foundation, which is you learn about the knowledge and you demonstrate that you retain that knowledge. And then you do some sort of test or assessment which demonstrates that you have the capacity or the capability to apply that knowledge. These are often called foundation and practitioner level. That's fine. It's great to say you've gained the knowledge, you know the principles, you know the language, and in a variety of scenario-based questions, you know how to apply that knowledge. But in the spirit of those principles I started off with, this is a long-term commitment to getting more skilled and more competent at project management. So we then go on to what's called Praxis Professional. And although I've spaced them evenly, there's a big gap between the second and the third, because the second says, in theory, I know how to apply this knowledge. The third level says, I've been there and I've done it. I've got the scars and the t-shirt, and I can convince somebody that I am competent at applying project management. Some of you may or may not have, some of you may have heard of the Association for Project Management's Chartered Project Manager. So I regard this as the peak of the profession. If you can demonstrate to their assessors that you have competently managed complex projects, then you can be a chartered project professional. If you gain Praxis Professional level, then all you have to do to get to chartered status is to commit to their code of ethics and also commit to continuing professional development. That's the only difference there is between those two levels. But as I said, there's a massive difference between practitioner and professional. Understand the theory, can apply it in principle, been there and done it. So all of these other things I'm talking about are really there to support people getting from level 2 to level 3. It's so many qualification schemes. You do a week's course, you take a couple of exams, thank you, good night, you're on your own now. What we're trying to do is to provide a framework which says we're going to give you the knowledge, we're going to help you develop the understanding principle, and then we're going to give you these tools like Praxis Local, like the checklists, like Team Praxis and others, which I'll be coming to shortly, which help you get from that level 2 to level 3, where you've been there, done it, you can demonstrate that you've been there and done it, and you can become something as lofty as a chartered project professional. So that's where we were in 2023. And the nature of the beast is that we can keep adding to it. We don't have to reissue the manual every 4 years. It's a case of the fundamental underpinning foundations of structure allow us to constantly add more content as new ideas come along about how we can achieve our objectives. So by this year, 2025, we've developed things like what's called the Praxis delivery model. I'll say more about this a little bit later. It is a spoiler alert. It's a response to what I've come to call LinkedIn project management, but I'll explain what that is a little later. Of course, we are taking advantage of all the ideas that AI is bringing to us. So in terms of making all the content accessible, we're using AI to produce a whole series of short videos. So If people want to read the web pages, they can. If they want to buy the book, the printed book, they can. Or if they prefer, they can watch videos. And we're producing these all the time and uploading them to the website and our YouTube channel. The other thing on the Marvin's, on the AI side is about bringing the entire professional body of knowledge to Marvin, to Praxis. And I'll explain how that's something that we've integrated into the framework, which again is a problem that I think exists with the existing best practice guides, whether they be ISO standards or professional body publication. And launching next week is something called the Praxis Playbook. But again, I'll explain a bit more about that in a moment. And what the logos at the bottom of the screen illustrate is that if you create the foundation and you give it away for free, people come along. So Team Praxis on the left, Marvin in the middle, and the Praxis Playbook from Method Grid on the right. These are all things where commercial organizations have come to us and said, yeah, we like the fact that you're giving this stuff away for free, and we want to contribute. We are doing other things, but we would like to give something back and make Praxis Framework better. So I did mention LinkedIn project management. I'm just checking. Oh yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Stephen said DISC is the first and so far only psychometric test. You felt the results were correct and applicable. That's heartening to hear, Stephen. And if you take a look at Team Praxis and the pages that, have a look. If you're red, green, blue, or yellow, have a look at the pages and see if they sort of got your attitude towards project management good practice right. How do competencies map to Sophia? Sophia doesn't go into a great deal of detail on project management. Obviously, it covers everything that IT people need to cover in terms of competencies. Sophia, interestingly, I mentioned APM Group, who are running the Praxis certifications. They're also running a scheme for Sophia. So I think at some point it would be worth us having another look. I looked at this some years ago, and Sophia didn't go into a great deal of detail on project management, but I'd certainly need to revisit that. So thanks for reminding me. Okay, so pending any more questions, LinkedIn project management. I get a lot of good ideas from LinkedIn. I meet a lot of great people on LinkedIn, but it is such a forum for dumbing down project management in some cases, in some instances. And these are some of the things that I think, some of the problems it causes. We have labels like Agile, Waterfall, Project Program, Portfolio. Now, you may say, well, what's the problem with those? Well, I'll come to it a little later on, but project management is a very diverse profession, very diverse discipline. And I don't think it helps to try and place all the subtleties and diversity of project management into a limited number of pigeonholes and label them. These make people very parochial. They align themselves with one of these and feel that what they do is not relevant to one of the others. So this labeling is not taking us forward. It is a barrier, I think, to proper adoption of good project management. Commoditization. I've already mentioned the way that you see so many posts that start with a massive percentage of how many projects fail. Of course, they never give details of the research that gives them these figures, but they sort of come up with a number. grab your attention with this big number. There is so much, there is money to be made out of project management, not in terms of running projects, but in selling things to the people who run those projects. And I don't like the commoditization. I don't like the way it's packaged, the way promotion is all about selling the product rather than encouraging an understanding of project management in its entirety. And as I've said, you know, in so many of these cases, once you've bought the product, you're on your own. That's it. You've paid your money, off you go. Those labels lead often to an attitude of, you often see binary statements. I see posts on LinkedIn to say, this works, this doesn't. And I've never seen one which gives or explains a tool, technique, or method in use in project management which never works, or conversely, always works. This is what the delivery model's about when I come to it. It's about saying everything has its place. Every tool, technique, model, they all have relevance. It depends on the context of what you are trying to achieve. And if you want to be a rounded, well-educated project manager, you have to be able to select the right tools for the job. You know, you don't see people on, I don't know, LinkedIn carpentry group saying this saw never works, this hammer always works. They're different tools for different circumstances. And increasingly, what we see is different sort of sub-communities within project management. So typically domain related. So IT people, construction people, pharmaceutical people will place very learned posts and assume that the whole diverse range of domains that project management is used in all work the same way. Well, they don't. So just because something's not working for you doesn't mean to say it's not going to work for everybody else. So again, this is related to the commoditization and the labeling and the binary statements. You know, I feel for any new project manager who thinks I'll go onto LinkedIn and read the posts of some experts and learn about project management. They will be ruined, in my view. So controversial, I know, but it's the way I feel about it at the moment. So one of the things we do, yeah, good point, David, when projects fail, who is ever held to account? Yeah, I'll try and weave that one in as I go through. So one of the things we've tried to do in practice to try and counter this parochial thinking is to come up with a model that broadly explains the project landscape. Now, as George Box famously said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. So yes, I know this model is going to simplify certain things, but I'm hoping it's useful in terms of beginning to develop this more holistic mindset. So on the horizontal scale, we've got scope, i.e. what you want to achieve with the project or program. Simple as that. This is what we want to achieve. And it might be a very straightforward, small, well-defined project. It might be extensive. You know, could be an Olympics or HS2. And against that, we have uncertainty. That is, well, how much do we know about precisely we want to achieve in the scope and how to achieve it? Now, uncertainty is low if you're building a bridge. You have tables of calculations, you have volumes of good practice about how to build a bridge over a particular span. And the uncertainty is low. But then, of course, you get to developing an app or a large piece of computer software, and the uncertainty is high. You may be very certain about your overall objectives, but you're very uncertain about the detail, you're uncertain about how we're going to achieve it. And probably the best analogy I've been thinking about for this is you're on one side of a valley and you want to get to the other side of the valley, and there are multiple paths interweaving across the valley. If it's a bright sunny day and you can see all the paths, you can pick your route and you can run. If the valley's full of fog, you've got to take it in baby steps and feel your way through. The uncertainty is high. And within this landscape, I would say from the bottom left to the top right is where you get increasing complexity. The greater the extent of the work and the more uncertain you are about it, the greater the complexity that you've got to handle. Now, what happens in the modern world is that people say, well, uncertainty is just waterfall and agile. Scope is projects, programs, and portfolios. That is so simplistic. And it, again, the arguments you see people having on social media, agile is the answer to everything. Waterfall is the devil's own method. That's not a project, that's a program, or vice versa. In reality, uncertainty exists on a scale. And our response to that is increasing agility. So if we're building a bridge, we don't need to be especially agile. We will be agile during the design phase, but when we've completed the design phase and we know what we're going to build, then the agility drops off considerably. There's again on LinkedIn at the moment, there's a lot of hype about the release of the new PMI Guide to the Body of Knowledge, a PMBOK. And people are saying, here is the new definition of a project. You can't really define a project. You can describe a typical project and you can describe a typical program. But there are plenty of initiatives that sort of a bit of one, a bit of the other. They sort of morph one into the other. They overlap. You could look at things and say, oh, yeah, that's definitely a project. That's definitely a program. But there are plenty of others that are sort of somewhere in between that need an understanding of both environments to make them work. And of course, a portfolio could be a collection of simple projects all the way through to a collection of complex programs. So that covers quite a wide range. So these dotted pigeonholes that I put up before are unrealistic. Everything is on a graded continuum. And the whole point of this delivery model is to say, right, if you're coming into this profession, if you're trying to make sense of it, it's a lot easier if you think in terms of this gradation rather than separate pigeonholes. The separate pigeonholes in my mind is the route to disaster. And of course, we've got an AI generated video on this with our AI avatar explaining all about uncertainty and agility, for example. Stephen said, when projects fail, who is ever held to account? Usually the business analyst. I'll pause for a moment and just say a few things about that. What is a failed project? We see a lot of, again, statistics on LinkedIn, as I've said. 80% of projects fail. Okay, well, define failure. Well, it didn't meet its estimated budget. It didn't finish in time. Is that the only measure of success? Did it deliver the benefits? Did it perhaps deliver 90% of the benefits? Or 110% of the benefits? Where's the line between success and failure? And of course, when it comes to, well, the project was late or it was over budget, I think it was the second project manager I ever worked for as a young planner, fresh out of university. And he had a bit of a twinkle in his eye when he said to me, yeah, a successful project is the result of good management. A failed project is a result of bad estimating. So I finished it as soon as it was practical to finish, but the estimator got it wrong when he predicted the finish date. So it was all down to the estimators. Okay, yeah. So if something isn't fit for purpose, that's a different issue than when people often talk about success and failure on LinkedIn. They're not talking about whether the end product is fit for purpose. The vast majority of them are talking about, well, it was a week late, or it was 4.8 over budget. And that is, again, too simplistic for my liking. Anyway, I must press on. So here we have one of the uses of the delivery model. And this sort of circles back to the point I made about the binary attitudes of, critical path analysis is the devil's spawn. Nobody should use critical path analysis. And Gantt charts, don't get me started on Gantt charts. They're evil. Rubbish. I mean, you'll see equal number of posts, provided you're connected to a diverse range of people. At the other extreme, I conversed with somebody who said, every project has a critical path. End of story. Well, I disagree with both those views. I think critical path has its place. Typically, low uncertainty, relatively straightforward projects. And, a bridge, for example, may not look that simple, but it's well established how to build a bridge. So it's not especially complicated. And critical path is great. Gantt charts are great, but not in every circumstance. You're not going to use causal loop diagrams to work out how to build a bridge, because that's not the way it works. Every tool, every technique, every model in the Praxis Encyclopedia, and a whole load that aren't in the Praxis Encyclopedia because we haven't got them in there yet, have their place on this model. So let's talk about the body of knowledge. And Andrew, you said when external factors come into play and the project business case is no longer valid, is that a failed project? Well, that's another interesting one. That suggests that you're not updating the business case according to external factors. If, again, I'm going to be slightly cynical is the wrong word, but if, as you should, you constantly update the business case based on latest information, the project always meets its business case. It's just not the one you started out with. But flippancy aside, we have to keep reviewing the business case. And if the business case is not stacking up to our satisfaction, we cancel the project. Is a cancelled project a failed project? It's another point of debate. Yes, you might have wasted half the money that you have spent on it so far before you discovered it wasn't going to work, but then you've saved the other half that you would have spent if you just carried on. So, there's so many nuances, there's so many factors in every circumstance, and we have to take all those. You have to take a very adult, grown-up attitude to all of this and recognise that human endeavour would get nowhere if we didn't take risks. So projects have to take risks. When the risk gets too high, you stop the project. But if you have a high risk appetite, you keep going, and sometimes you're going to produce wonderful things. It's straightforward if you have this broader view. Anyway, the body of knowledge. As I said at the start, the body of knowledge resides in all of us. Those who practice project management, those who comment on project management, those who are academics in the field of project management. That is the professional body of knowledge. It's vast. And you can buy so many books that are perhaps called the body of knowledge, or methodologies, or standards. None of these come anywhere near covering the entire body of knowledge. They all approach it from different angles. And you'll see I've even put the Praxis Framework book there. I am not claiming that Praxis Framework covers everything anybody could possibly want to know about project management. Far from it. It's a doorway into that world. So you've got bodies of knowledge, you've got methodologies, you've got standards, and none of them cover the whole shebang. So the trick in embedding or encouraging and embedding good practices is to somehow find a link between your starting point and the wider body of knowledge. And this is something which suddenly became very possible with the advent of AI. When I spoke to Proms G in 2023, nobody was talking about AI. Now everybody's talking about AI. So a couple of years ago, we formed an alliance with a company called Projecting Success to develop something called Marvin. So Marvin, I'm sure many of you know, derived from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, brain the size of a planet, and all they did was ask him to open doors. Our Marvin does a bit more than that. Because when I first started using AI, when everybody first started talking about it, the thing that became very apparent to me was that if I asked AI ChatGPT about a subject I knew nothing about, GPT was wonderful, such an expert, gave me all the information I needed. If I then asked ChatGPT about a subject I know quite a lot about, he knows nothing. It was rubbish. The information you get from an LLM is presented really well and very convincingly, but you've got to check it, like you really do with any information. You've got to apply some critical thinking. So what we decided to do, and in that little collection of photos there, the chap on the top right there is Martin Paver. He's the owner of Projecting Success. And he's the one who said, why don't we create an LLM which is only trained on curated, trusted material, so that when people then ask questions, they're not going to get, in effect, a chatbot that has trawled LinkedIn for all the rubbish I've just been talking about. So fortunately, having been in this business for, gosh, approaching 50 years, I was able to phone up a number of people and say, come on, you've written a book. Why not donate that to our content library? And very fortunately, a lot of people said, yeah, great, I'm happy to do that. Because of course, for them, it doesn't mean they're giving their book away. It means they're allowing Marvin to read their book and include their material in his answers. Just like a consultant would. If you hire a consultant in any field, they've read a load of books and their answers will include what they've learned from those books. So it's not a way to get around get these books for free. It's a way of asking questions which will take the opinions and content of all these expert authors into account. We then built that into the Praxis Framework website. So whenever you've got an example there of the knowledge page or benefits management, and over on the right there's a button for Marvin. You click on Marvin, it opens a window. So where should project benefits be documented? There are your answers. That's a fairly straightforward question. You can ask all manner of other questions. But we're building up Marvin's knowledge all the time. There's a button there about our contributors, which will tell you all the different publications that are in there. That, for me, is the link between the framework that gives you the structure and the vast amount of knowledge out there, which we're still working on pulling into Marvin, which fleshes out and amplifies and elaborates on the basic structure that the framework gives you. And we put a button into Praxis Local as well. So you can just click on that and call up Marvin. So, you know, if you produce this tailored front end to Praxis, which links to your own stuff, then and distributed that to people within your project management community, then each of them has a button that then allows them to ask questions of Marvin. Do you have to sign in, get account to see Marvin? No, you just go to, probably had him there, there we go. Marvin LLM Azure websites.net. That's all you need. You don't need the other bits afterwards are links to this particular chat. But the easiest way is go to the Praxis Framework website, practiceframework.org, and you will find a link on the homepage to Marvin, or you can go into the framework and on any page you'll find a link to Marvin. That's probably the easiest way to get to. I didn't know that Marvin existed. Great idea. Do you know how this compares to PMI's attempt at a PM LLM? Oh, that's a leading question, isn't it? Yes, I do. I think the choose my words carefully here. I think the PMI is a very, very commercial organization. I think their eyes are more on making money than they are on curating their content. So, for instance, if you asked the PMI Infinity, what are the stages of a project management lifecycle, it would come back in an answer which directly contradicts one of the pages of the PMI's body of knowledge. Because there is a certain aspect of the PMI body of knowledge which is widely misunderstood and misrepresented. I just mentioned it. People confuse process groups with life cycle phases. I won't bore you with any more detail on that. And there's an awful lot of content on the internet that makes that confused or confuses that issue. And PMI's LLM picks all that up and reproduces it. So they don't properly curate the content. And if you wanted a single observation which sort of illustrates their attitude, I'm not a member anymore, but a friend of mine who is a member sent me the homepage of PMI's Infinity, Marvin, and the first question it suggests you ask on it is, how can I get my PMP certification? So they're suggesting that you use their LLM to understand better how to buy their certification. There you go. I'd probably better not say any more than that. So let's talk about AI videos. As I said, there's so many great things that there's a lot of downsides, but there's so many great things that we can now use AI for. It gives me, I used to spend probably 6 months working with somebody to translate Praxis into another language. You know, I can't remember. I think it's in 8 languages. All of those translations were done by translators, volunteer project managers who wanted to translate this material so that it could be available to people in their native language. You can now just, the last one was German, and the guy who was working on the German translation, he said, well, we just translated the whole thing with AI and then edited it, checked it. Whereas in 2023, when I was talking to this group, the Italian, the Chinese, the Spanish translations were all done by people over the space of months. AI is great for that kind of thing, and in an hour, with checking and a bit of fiddling around, I can produce a video on Monte Carlo analysis or similarities and differences of critical path and critical chain, And then I can translate it into multiple languages and have somebody speak that language to people who want to watch the video. It's amazing. So there's so much we could do with these video generation. Again, we never lose sight of the original objectives. And one of those principles I said was about accessibility. So this is helping us make it accessible to people who would rather watch a video. We're making it more accessible to people who want to watch a video in a language other than English. It's our ability to address these issues, like accessibility, is increasing rapidly with AI. I thought I'd just slip in, it's all very well talking about this thing in theory, but who's using it? These are just some of the people who are using it, and I'm going to mention a couple of them in more detail. It's a bit indulgent of me, but I just want to pick up on that middle one, Scale. This really was a gift for me because I'm a bit of a science nerd, particularly astronomy. And SCAO is the Square Kilometre Array Organisation. They're in Australia and South Africa. They are building, it's headquartered at Jodrell Bank. They're building the world's largest radio telescope. It's not a single telescope, it's a number of different radio telescopes that are linked to create a virtual, absolutely enormous radio telescope to look way, way back towards the Big Bang. Which is the kind of stuff I love to read about. And the mere thought that this organisation was using Praxis to assess their projects and improve their capability and maturity was an absolute dream. But there we go. That's my indulgence done for the moment. So here's a type of collaboration. One example of the type of collaboration that giving this stuff away for free enables. So we have our series of certifications here that take people from basic knowledge all the way up to chartered professional. There's an organisation called House of PMO, and they train and certify project management office people. And they phoned up and said, well, we're training PMO people in the workings of a PMO, but we have to include basic project management material. Is it true we can use your material without payment? So I said, well, yes, it's all Creative Commons. Really? We don't have to pay you any license fees. No, just build it into your certifications. That's fine. Just acknowledge where you got it from. So we ended up with a suite of certifications for project managers and PMO people that are based on the same terminology, the same taxonomy, the same general understanding of the principles of project, program, or portfolio, which I think can't be a bad thing. But of course, if we didn't have this very open attitude, that wouldn't have happened. So before I just move into another aspect of collaboration, I'm just going to repeat something I said at my 2023 presentation. The Praxis approach to organizational maturity is a very agile way, one might say. The CMMI model has these 5 levels, and you do a very expensive company assessment to find out what level you're at. Then you pay the consultant to define an expensive program of improvement. And then a year or 2 years later, you do another expensive assessment to find out if you've got from 2 to 3 or from 1 to 4 or whatever. What Praxis does is to say, right, we've got the model, we've got these online questionnaires, they're 360 degree. So your project manager fills in the questionnaires, as do the team members, as do your stakeholders and the project sponsor. And that gives you a maturity score for the project, the program, the portfolio, whatever. But more importantly, in a way than that, it's not just about getting a score. It's about the team understanding why they gave different answers. So the project manager thinks the stakeholder management is going really, really well. But if you look at where the agreements and disagreements are in the 360 assessment, the stakeholders aren't feeling the love quite so much as you'd expect. So the two need to get together and find out what's going wrong. I think stakeholders are well communicated with. Well, we're not so sure. We're not feeling that we're in the loop. Okay, let's try and work out what the problem is. You work out what the problem is. The stakeholders say, yeah, okay, that's great. The stakeholder communication is doing well now. I'll change the answers on my form. Oh, look, the company's maturity level's just gone up a bit. And this is a real-time thing. So you can get your projects to fill in these forms. That gets consolidated into programs. That gets consolidated at portfolio level. And you then take an action, which maybe is a week or 2 weeks, and there's some improvement. And you take some more actions, and there's a bit more improvement. And people can see that there's some improvement. And you're doing it yourself. And you're not paying for some ridiculous extra program. It's always struck me as ironic that if you assess a company and it comes out that they are level 1 maturity in program management, the first thing you do is to get them to manage a program to take them to level 3 or whatever. Well, you've just found out they're not very good at doing it. So what do you expect when it doesn't happen? So this is about putting the power into the people who are at the coalface and enabling them to see these incremental improvements. And of course, at an individual level, what it means is it's addressing that Monday morning problem, because they're having to think about what they learned on the course last week and apply it, and then confirm that they've applied it and have other people confirm that they've applied it. And as we all know, if you want to learn a new skill, it's about repetition and thinking about it and doing it and seeing the results. So it works on multiple levels. There's the form. Are we doing this? Are we doing that? Here's a statement. Do I agree with it? Do I disagree with it? Or do I, for some reason, can I not either agree or disagree? Again, that comes out in the report as, okay, here's something you need to talk about within the team. And of course, you can go back to team praxis and maybe see if they're different disk types. That might explain why they've got different perspectives. And then you can produce various reports. But a company called Sunwater came along to us. This is effectively Queensland, Australia's equivalent of Thames Water. And they had 70 projects in 4 portfolios. And a bit like Scale, they put all their projects into Praxis 360, this is called. And they've got their reports, where they were mature, where they weren't so mature, where the areas they need to improve were. But they wanted more insights. They felt there was a lot of data there that they weren't able to access that could help a great deal with their understanding of the culture within the organization. So they just called us up and said, how's about there's an export function? Can you add a button which exports all this data into Power BI? Because I think it comes out in an Excel format, but Power BI then picks that up. So, I was honest with them. I said, look, sounds like a great idea. We give everything we do away for free. So we don't really have the money to invest in something like this. So they said, okay, we'll pay for it. So I was cheeky and I said, okay, if you pay for it, can we then give it away for free to everybody else? And they went away and they thought about it. And as with any large organization, their lawyers sat on it for about 3 months. And then they came back and said, yes. And we signed an agreement. My original thoughts were we just add this button and anybody and everybody could export their data. But that's not the way that Sunwater wanted it to work. They didn't want just anybody printing out the data. They wanted that to be within the control of the PMO. And I can see a lot of organizations saying that. So we've now implemented it on an as requested basis. So if somebody says, I want to be able to export my data to Excel or Power BI, they have to ask us, and we then add an export button to their account. Those, when you work with people who are prepared to fund a feature that they want in your product and make it available to others, you have to accept that they might have some constraints on how that is then implemented. And that's the way this one worked. This is the last one on the collaboration, because again, a company came along, they're called Method Grid, and interestingly, they won the SME of the Year award at the APM awards on it was last night, Wednesday night. And what they do is they produce something called playbooks or grids. And this one, you can see it contains, across the top, it has effectively it has the method section of Praxis across the top and the knowledge section down the left-hand side. These boxes with the bottom right-hand corner chopped off, you click on those and then you get more information about that particular topic. Again, you'll be able to see that this is all extracted directly from the Praxis website. There are links back to the Praxis website. So in some ways, it's a little bit like Praxis Local, but it's a more interactive version of Praxis Local. Praxis Local is as I said, the tip of the iceberg window onto the full framework, whereas this is a tool you interact with, which then links to all the content on the Praxis website. Again, Method Grid, commercial organisation, sell this to people like National Rail and their subcontractors. But what they agreed to do was to make a vanilla version free, freely available. But obviously, there's then a paywall. If you want to edit it and make changes to it, you'd have to sign up for Method Grid. But it's just another example of how people say, can we use Praxis because it's free and we'd like to do something with it? And we then turn around and say, well, yeah, that's fine. You can do that. How's about you give something back as well? How about you give something away for free to help people embed good practices in their day-to-day work in their broader organisation? So to the 2023 features, we've added Marvin, AI videos, Praxis delivery model, and Method Grid. Now, if John was kind enough to invite me back in 2029, what would be in the hexagons with the question marks? I don't have a clue. People will come along and say, how's about we do so-and-so? And we'll say, well, does that advance our principles? If it does, great, let's do it. If it doesn't, no, you can use it, but it's not something that we can add to the Praxis landscape. So there you have it. I'm sorry that was a bit of a rattle through, but there was quite a bit to cover. As I said, I know, because I repeat myself, it's all there, it's all free. You can go and look at all this. I hope that what I've talked about has at least given you some food for thought and some ideas of the sort of things that you might want to go away and investigate a little bit further. Ultimately, I would say open your minds to the broader discipline and profession of project management, read widely, get a sense of perspective, sense of balance, and for me, 50 years, it has been a great profession, and I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much again for inviting me. Thank you, John. I'm happy if there are any further questions.
Thank you, Adrian. That's brilliant. Is there anyone wanting to ask any more questions? I don't think there's anything new in the chat at the moment.
No, nothing.
I think that Martin Paver, he spoke to the PromsG audience in December last year, and there is a recording of his event on the website if anyone wants to have a look at that. And you mentioned House of PMO. Of course, Eileen Rodden and Lindsay Scott from House of PMO are regular speakers to the Proms G audience. Martin talked about AI, obviously, and I'm just wondering what you think about, the future of project management in the growing sort of AI situation. I don't know if you saw the.
Before I answer the question, John, can I just demonstrate my incompetence and say I'm trying to unshare my screen?
Oh, right, okay.
Stop playing ball.
Um,
I clicked on the share button again, and it doesn't seem to want to take me away from.
uh,
Did anybody? There's a lot of IT people out there. Technical support, please. How do I stop sharing my screen in Zoom?
should be. Should be. Don't you get a
Switch it
little
off and switch it on
thing
again.
at the top?
Classic.
Don't
How
you get
much
an
do you
icon at
charge
the
for that
top?
advice? Um,
I can
I
share
think if
mine
you share yours, it will probably take it away from me.
and then unshare. There you go.
Excellent.
So I was just wondering about what you think about the use of AI in project management. I don't know if you saw it, but there was an interview on BBC Two a couple of days ago with the CEO of Google, and he was saying he said that we will have to make there will have to be societal adjustments.
It's
Uh,
Yeah, and it's quite a febrile atmosphere at the moment, isn't it? And if I may just, again, indulge my age for a moment. I give you an example. In 1979, I was part of a team that developed a bit of scheduling software for an Apple II. And we did this on the building site. It meant we could turn around a revised schedule in a day rather than 2 weeks going through the bureau. And our data processing manager visited and looked at it and said, desktop computers, that will never catch on. This bit of software turned out, it ended up in the first ever Apple software catalog called Special Delivery Software. And we took it into a company, I think it was a housing association, said, well, you could use a couple of these to do your scheduling. They said, yeah, it's great. That's what we want to do. But before we do that, we have to present a business case to the unions to convince them that this will not put somebody out of a job. So 45 years ago, all the febrile atmosphere you're seeing around AI was there with desktop computers. And here we are today, everyone's got one in their pocket, using it for all manner of things. And I think, yes, that societal change will happen. Simple as that. To my grandchildren, AI is already just part of their lives. Papa, how do I do this on Pokemon Shining Pearl? I don't know. Well, ask Google. And of course, Google comes up with the answer. So I think, in terms of project management, the stuff I've been talking about is focused on LLMs and the dissemination and organization of good practice. Martin is also heavily involved in AI agents and trying to set up data trusts to do clever things like create your schedule for you or create your budget on a type of project for you and all that kind of thing. So, I think LLM type AIs is a very different thing to agentic AI. And I'm at that comfortable point in life where I can just sit back and enjoy the ride and watch other people struggle with it. How many people are involved in creating the Praxis framework, David? depends how you count them. Basically, there's a core of just a very few of us who put the website together, maintain the website. But then if you include the translators, the people who create things like team praxis, then it's a wider team. It's basically whoever wants to get involved at any point in time. I do the curation, I provide the it's not a phrase I like, but it was 2011. I was the lead author for the APM 6th edition of their body of knowledge. And what they said was they wanted the body of knowledge to speak with a single voice. So that, I think it was about 3,000 people contributed to it, but it had to be edited so that it spoke with a single voice. So I'm the person who provides that single voice for Praxis, as I did for APM Block 6. But in terms of contributors and all the different aspects of it, I haven't sat down and counted them all up. There's quite a lot.
Is it all voluntary in terms of the people that are contributing to it?
The only person who's paid is the guy who has the company that adds bits to the website. So when we wanted that button to export, as I said, that was going to cost money because I don't expect the web developer to work for free. But Sunwater said, yeah, this is worth the money. We want it. We want that feature. And once we've got it, we're happy for other people to use it as well. Martin is with Marvin, the AI, I curate the content, and it's Martin and his team who actually program and maintain Marvin and run the platform that he's on. So that's something that Projecting Success are happy to finance and make freely available to everybody else.